Essentially, I'm the head of technology for Ambry Hill Technologies. We're a software vendor. We have a couple of software as a service based products that are marketed specifically to the aviation aftermarket. So our customers are companies that buy and sell airplane parts, manufacture, maintain aircraft, repair aircraft and aircraft components. So if you buy and sell parts or work on parts or work on airplanes, if you inventory airplane parts in a warehouse, all of that kind of activity you can do within our systems. The sort of simple-minded ones are the time zone differences or make things really difficult, but less simple-minded ones, things that we didn't expect would be as big a problem. The offshore development culture is such, in India at least in our experience, is such that it's difficult to hand the keys to them and know that they're working the direction you expect them to be working, because there's not as much direct contact, there's not as much direct oversight. There's a lot less clarity in what they're doing and how they're doing it on a daily basis than there would be if it was a team in-house. The nearshore model, specifically because I'm in San Diego and Arkus was in Tijuana, until the pandemic, I was spending a day a week in the offices in Tijuana. I would just head down there and work a day there. And so it was much closer to having the same level of interaction with the Arkus team as I would have had if I'd had my own in-house team, right? So it meant that we had much better clarity of what was happening every day on a daily basis. That doesn't mean that there weren't miscommunications. There certainly were. We definitely ended the first phase of our work with Arkus. We had basically a turnkey team, agile team that was run by Arkus, but worked with us directly and dedicated. And there was definitely, when that phase ended, there was some substantial technical debt that we had accrued that we hadn't necessarily recognized. We're working through that now. Would that have also been the case if we'd been working in a more traditional in-house team? I'm not sure, don't know how to evaluate that. When that phase was over, I think we worked with a 16-person team, which I think sort of got broken up into two teams, but a lot of that management was just done for us by Arkus. And now we've scaled that down, and we're working with Arkus more in a staff augmentation manner. So I've got half of my team are full-time employees for Ambry Hill, the other half are staff augmentation from Arkus, but now it's an in-house team and everyone is treated as in the same way. They're all just on our team. Arkus has been able to provide us with the resources we need when we need them. When we were getting started, we needed a lot of boots on the ground. We had a lot of different development fronts that needed to be pushed forward at the same time. We actually were starting from scratch, so we even needed some recommendations in terms of technology stack, not necessarily because we didn't know what technology we wanted to use. It was more about availability of resources who could work in a stack, what was going to give us the most ability to move quickly and still have the same sort of level of robustness when we were done with it. So Arkus was able to bring us all of those resources in the numbers that we needed, whereas if I'd had to hire those 16 people, it would have been a lot riskier, I believe, because the folks at Arkus actually had already worked together. They were well established in their roles. They were well established in their roles within a team with one another. And having to build that from scratch would have, I think, taken a lot longer, and it would have delayed how quickly we were able to get to market. When we reached the end of our first scheduled phase, where we were expecting to downsize the team and move into more of a maintenance and a slower new development pace, Arkus was able to allow us to keep some of the key players off of the original team. So we were able to move into that new phase and keep the experience and expertise that we had built over the 2.5 years before that, which is something that you would have had if you were doing it all in-house, but it was great that we were able to get that same benefit even while working with a contractor team, right? So Arkus has certainly shown us the flexibility to be able to provide us with the resources we need when we need them. It's not always been perfect. There have been times when somebody needed to rotate off of our team and there wasn't really anybody there at Arkus who was ready to join. But, that meant that they went on a recruiting kick and found somebody. And so we've never really had to wait. We've never been stuck with missing resources for long at all. So yeah, it's been, it's offered us all of the flexibility that we've needed so far without having to do it all ourselves, which also frees us up to do our own work rather than recruiting and vetting. So. Realistically, I think that the reason that it worked better with Arkus may not have been directly because it was nearshore versus offshore, so much as the people that the specific people we were working with, right? I mean, the product owner that we worked with from Arkus turned out to have had direct experience in our industry, our target industry. So there was a much shorter ramp-up time for him to learn the things he needed to know about the system to be able to become a really useful, really valuable part of the process. I mean, one of the problems that we had with the folks we worked with in India, and the truth is we still work with part of that team. We have a permanent relationship now with part of that team. So every day I still work with those Indian developers. But those people no longer are part of that contracting company that we had originally worked with. And it may just be serendipity that the folks we happened to work with in India had a culture of I'm not sure what the best way to describe this is, but at least from my perspective as the customer, you explain to them what it is you need, how you need something to work, what you need them to build, and they come up with a project that's going to make them as much money as possible, which may solve my problem, but that isn't necessarily the direction I would have liked this contractor to take. When it came to working with Arkus, I didn't see that particular motivation in the way that they were designing software or the way that they were having their team working, right? It didn't feel like there was an attempt to take advantage. Instead, there was what felt like a real partnership where they felt like they had skin in the game too, and that they were working with an eye towards doing the very best job they could, rather than working with an eye towards billing as many hours as they could. At least from my experience, given that I have spent my whole life living in Southern California, I found that interactions between our management team and our other permanent employees and the resources that Arkus brought to bear from Mexico was a lot, and continues to be, a lot simpler, a lot smoother than those same interactions with the team in India. And I think that that's, to a large degree, I think that that's just because the Mexican technology culture and the US technology culture are more similar to one another. We have more overlap of experience and expectation than the overlap between those two cultures as you get further and further offshore. Doesn't mean that we can't work well, but it's easier. In the talks that we've had earlier in the day today, some folks have already touched on some of these things, so that I don't think that my experience is unusual. Language, there are still language barriers, but we've found that the language barrier that exists between English and Spanish is a much smaller barrier to climb than the language barrier between English and Hindi or Gujarati or Marathi, whatever your team is. So that doesn't mean that the resources don't all speak English. They do, but it's still not perfectly smooth, right? I think that the time zone thing is a real issue. 12 hours difference between the daylight hours of your local people and your offshore people can make for some real problems. But the reality is that there are still problems when it's only a 2 or a 3 hour difference, right? I can't tell you how many times the president of our company has come to me angry because he's about to leave for the day. He's in the East, and all of the developers have just gone off to lunch, and I can't get my questions answered before I have to leave for the day. And I'm like, yeah, this is the reality of a global company. So it's not that there are no problems, but they're smaller. The scale of those problems seems always to be smaller. And then the other thing is, again, specifically for our situation, the fact that I'm located in San Diego and Arkus is in Tijuana meant that to a large degree, we could treat the team like it was a local team, right? And actually sit down with them and go to a whiteboard and that's something we could never do with the team we've also got developers in Taiwan and in India, and you just can't do that. And the electronic tools are great, but it's not the same as being in the same room.